بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما لله تبارك وتعالى السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. I remind myself and I remind you of two hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we should keep in our mind that are always encouragements for us to continue on the path that we are currently traveling, which is the path of seeking knowledge. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Talibul ilmi faridatun ala kulli Muslim." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, seeking knowledge, the knowledge, is an obligation on every Muslim. And the scholars, in explaining this hadith, they said, by the Prophet mentioning knowledge in the definite form, al-ilm, what is understood from that is the knowledge of the sacred law. The knowledge of the sacred law that is a personal obligation on every morally responsible individual. And then there's another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, whoever Allah willed good things for him, he would give them the understanding of the religion, or give him the understanding of the religion. So the fact that every time you get an opportunity to increase in Islamic knowledge, especially that personal obligatory knowledge, it is a sign for you that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala willed good for you. So glad tidings to us who are in this process of seeking knowledge. Inshallah, today we're going to read through the section of Al-Hayd and An-Nifas, which is menstruation and postnatal bleeding. And also Al-Istihada, which is bleeding that is not related to the menstrual cycle or the postnatal bleeding. These rulings are specifically related to women, but men who have wives and daughters and women under their care need to understand these rules just so that they can educate their family and people under their responsibility. Bismillah, let's recite Al-Fatiha to the soul of Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala. Al-Fatiha.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. The author, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him, said, menstruation and postnatal bleeding. 2.27. Menstruation may begin after the age of 9. The minimal menstruation period is a day and a night. The maximum is 15 days. Postnatal bleeding.
Keep these times. You have a minimum period, so a minimum age. So at 9 years old, that's when that bleeding is going to be considered menstruation, at 9. It could happen after that because the woman, one of the ways to become morally responsible is when she has her menstrual cycle, which starts at the age of 9. And if she doesn't have it by the age of 15, she's going to be considered morally pubescent by the age of 15, no matter what happens. So at 9, it's beginning stage. 15, it's maximum stage before she becomes morally responsible. In terms of the length, it's minimum going to be 24 hours. And the max is 15 days. After that, it's considered another type of bleeding, which is not the bleeding of the menstrual cycle, and is going to have different rules. So between 24 hours and 15 days. This is in the Shafi'i school. Other schools, the numbers are different.
Postnatal bleeding, the fast,
Which
lasts
is the bleeding after childbirth. So the norm for the menstrual cycle is around 6 to 7 days normally. It could be less depending on the people, and it could be more, but the normal is 6 or 7 days.
last at least a moment and at most 60 days. If
Mhm.
it lasts longer than the maximum, it is considered to be chronic vaginal discharge, as
Which is called
discussed.
al-istihada, and this is considered a sickness, and we're going to learn later it is dealt with a different way,
As discussed at 2.28.
because the one who is on the menstrual cycle or postnatal bleeding is in a state of major ritual impurity, and the one who's in the other state, so they cannot pray in that state, it's unlawful. The one who exceeded those maximum days, right? Or less than the minimum, the maximum days, or less than the maximum period, or the minimum period, that person has a sickness and they must pray, but they must take certain rules they must fulfill before they could do it.
The minimal interval of purity between two menstruations is 15 days. There is no maximum limit to the number of days between menstruations.
So, whatever the period lasts, that menstrual cycle or that postnatal bleeding lasts, between that cycle must be at least 15 days of purity, right? The menstrual cycles. Other than that, there is considered sickness.
Per reliance of the traveler, whenever a woman who is old enough notices her bleeding, even if pregnant, she must avoid what a woman in her period avoids, as defined at 2.30 in the end.
So
If
she cannot pray, she cannot fast, she cannot make tawaf around the Kaaba, she cannot recite the Quran, she cannot carry or touch the Quran. That is all those matters. Mm.
If it ceases in less than 24 hours, literally the minimum, then it is not considered menstruation, and the woman must make up the prayers she has omitted during it. If,
So because she's going to stop as soon as she see the blood. But if it stops before the 24 hours, then she has to make up those prayers that she stopped because of seeing the blood.
if it ceases at 24 hours within 15 days or between the two, then it is menstruation. If it exceeds 15 days, then she is a woman with abnormal vaginal bleeding, as discussed at 2.28.
Now,
Yellow or dusky colored discharge is considered, menstrual flow. Per the translator, a woman's menstrual period is not legally considered over until she can insert a piece of white cotton in the privates and it comes out white.
and here that's the important. When you consider the menstrual cycle over, you want to wait to the complete stopping of the blood, right? So even the spotting, you have to wait till that's done.
If a woman has times of intermittent bleeding and cessation during an interval of 15 days or less, and the times of bleeding collectively amount to at least 24 hours, then the entire interval, bleeding and non bleeding, is considered menstruation.
So if she's bleeding and stop bleeding and bleed it again, and it's within the 24 hours and the 15 days, she's going to count all of that as her menstrual cycle if it goes over 24 hours. So it doesn't have to be a continuous flow within that period of time.
Chronic annulment of ablution.
And this is called al-istihada. Let me put it. right? Which means that's the bleeding, which is not the menstrual cycle, al haid, and it's not an nifas. So this is an illness by which the woman bleeds. Religiously, uh, it's considered having a sickness. So she must do certain things. So you must pay attention. Once you got the times, then it's quite simple to deal with something that is outside. Yeah, go ahead. That's outside the time frames. Go ahead.
Per the translator, chronic here means that one cannot remain without annulling ablution long enough to perform both purification and the prayer. Per reliance of the traveler, a woman with abnormal vaginal bleeding preparing to pray must wash her private parts, apply something absorbent to them, per translator, which must be completely inserted into the privates without anything remaining outside, and a dressing, per translator, such as an external absorbent pad, and then perform ablution, intending authorization to perform the prayer, not lifting ritual impurity as such.
Why? Because this is a sickness, and the flowing of blood is najasa, and one cannot normally pray in that state. But because there's a sickness, the law gives a dispensation to pray, to pray while in that state. So when she intends to pray, she doesn't make the intention of lifting the state of hadath or ritual impurity. Rather, she intends to make salat permissible because she's still in a state of impurity. But the sacred law gives her the dispensation because of this illness to pray in that state. So the intention is to what? Make prayer permissible. Like the one who makes a tayammum, he makes the intention not to lift the state of ritual impurity, but to make prayer permissible.
She may not delay commencing her prayer after this except for reasons of preparing to pray, such as clothing her nakedness, awaiting the call to prayer, adhan, or for a group to gather for the prayer. If she delays for other reasons, she must repeat the purification.
And she cannot do that before the time of the prayer comes in. So once the time of the prayer comes in, then she does these steps of preparing to pray, like cleaning herself, inserting the absorbent material, putting the protective uh, cloth, and then making ablution and preparing to pray. And she has to pray immediately. So if she's praying in congregation, she's going to wait for the other matters. If not, immediately she has to pray.
She is obliged to wash her private parts, apply a dressing, and perform ablution, per translator, directly and without interruption before each obligatory prayer, per translator, after that prayer's time has come, though she is entitled, like those mentioned below, to perform as many non obligatory prayers as she wishes, carry and read the Quran, and so on, until the next prayer's time comes, or until her ablution is broken for a different reason, when she must renew the above measures and her ablution.
Uh, yes, she needs something to absorb the blood. So she would use that. Yes. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, go ahead.
2.29 Per reliance of the traveler, people unable to hold back intermittent drops of urine coming from them must make the same measures that a woman with chronic vaginal discharge does. And
So this
likewise,
is going to, whether a male or a female, they have like they cannot uh hold their urine, it drops out, or after they go to the bathroom, it doesn't always come out and it drips. So this person who has this illness needs to do the same thing in terms of cleaning oneself, making istinja, putting a protective bandage so that the urine doesn't drop on one's clothes. The same like the woman with the chronic annulment of ablution.
And likewise, for anyone in a state of chronic annulment of ablution, such as continually breaking wind or emitting excrement or madhi, as defined at 2.18 end. Though washing and applying an absorbent dressing are only obligatory when filth exits.
Because all of these things, blood, urine, feces, all that stuff is najasa. So, but if it's a sickness, you can't do anything about it. So you have to protect it from reaching your clothes, and then the sacred law gives you the dispensation in that situation because of the sickness to still pray and do all the other things.
If a person knows that drops of urine will not stop until the time for the next prayer comes, he takes the above measures and performs the prayer at the first of its time.
MashaAllah. Yes.
Actions unlawful without ritual purity. 2.3.
So we're going to talk about this, the state of al-hadath al-asghar and the state of al-hadath al-akbar. So when you're in a state of minor ritual impurity, there's some things you're not allowed to do. When you're in a state of major ritual impurity, and in this case, that's going to include the woman who is in a menstrual cycle or postnatal bleeding, they consider the rulings for them as the major ritual impurity. Go ahead.
The following are unlawful for someone in a state of minor ritual impurity, hadath, as defined at 2.8. Number 1, to perform the prayer. Number 2, per reliance of the traveler, to prostrate when reciting the Quran at verses in which it is sunnah to do so. Number 3, to prostrate out of thanks. Number 4, to circumambulate the Kaaba. Number 5, and to touch or carry a Quran. The preceding are also unlawful for someone in a state of major ritual impurity, janaba, as defined at
The
2.17.
exception for this rule to touch or carry the Quran is for the small child who is studying in the Quran. They could do it for the purpose of study, not for anything else.
Number 6, to recite the Quran. Number 7.
This is for the one in major, right?
Yes, the preceding are also unlawful for someone in a state of major ritual impurity, janaba, as defined at 2.17, as are number 6, to recite the Quran. Number 7, and to remain in a mosque. During menstruation and postnatal bleeding, all of the above are unlawful, as well as number 8, to take sensual enjoyment from what is between the navel and the knees until the purificatory bath, or ghusl, as defined at 2.19, is performed. Number 9, or to fast until menstruation or postnatal bleeding ceases. Per reliance of the traveler, the obligatory fast days she misses must be made up later, though not missed prayers.
وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, we're going to move quickly before we go into the prayer. Every day we'll read a little bit from the 8.1 on page 104. So we're moving in the same book, but to page 104, section 8.1. I want to cover this while we're going. So this is why Muslims follow madhabs. So it's a long session, so we'll just, every day till we finish it, we'll read a section of it, inshallah. So it's like 10, 15 pages, maybe even more. Yeah. Way more than that. Wow. Yeah, it's like 42 pages. But we'll read just a section at a time towards the end of our class. Bismillah, let us begin. So we're on page 104, and we'll just move along.
8.1, why Muslims follow madhabs. From Introduction, Roman number 11.
And we discussed that when it comes to following a madhab, there are two types of people. You have al-mujtahid, we should say al-mutlaq, an absolute mujtahid, and al-muqallid, right? So we have, in terms of following the sacred law, we have types of individuals, and there are levels among each, but we have al-mujtahid mutlaq, which is an absolute qualified legal scholar. Such a person does not follow someone else like them. They're obligated to deduce the legal rulings from the primary sources of Islamic law on their own and come up with their own legal conclusions. Everyone who is not like that is a muqallid, and they have to follow the methodology and the deductions of that mujtahid mutlaq. So that's a simple way. Now we're going to go in this section, is going this section is going to deal with that. Let me ask you this question first. Is it true while menstruating you can hold a Quran that is not in Arabic? I heard a non-Arabic Quran isn't officially the Quran. That's true. So if the Quran is not in Arabic, or most of it is not in Arabic, you can carry or touch that Quran, because that's not the Quran. Actually, that's the translation of the meanings of the Quran, right? And what is sought is not the Quran. The translation is sought, right? So that rule is an exception to that rule. Okay, Bismillah, let us begin.
From the translator.
So before we go into that, so I wanted to be clear. I think we've made it clear over and over again, no matter what anyone does, if you're not a mujtahid mutlaq, you are a muqallid. If you are a muqallid, you must follow a madhab. So I know in our time, there are people who are not mujtahid mutlaq, and they still following their own opinions from Quran and Sunnah. And this is haram, right? This is unlawful, right? They must follow a madhab among the four valid madhabs of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, right? They must follow one. So now when we say must follow a madhab, I want you to understand that means in any given ruling. So you don't have to follow necessarily the same madhab in every single religious ruling. Rather, you must follow qualified scholarship, which is in those four schools in a ruling. Now, normally, people follow one madhab because they usually learn a whole madhab. But sometimes you may not be able to learn every rule according to a madhab, a particular madhab. So you may learn some rules in according to the Hanafi school, and as far as you can go. But you have Shafi'i teachers to teach you the other rules. Then you must learn them according to the Shafi'i school or Maliki school or Hanbali school or whatever, right? So that is a ruling that I know in our time, you got many people who I follow Quran and Sunnah. This is wrong. And we're going to discuss why. Bismillah, go ahead.
Per the translator, the introduction to the present work was meant to clarify what fiqh, or Islamic jurisprudence, is, and what use a small handbook like the present one may be to whoever reads it. The section below expands on this, since many Muslims today, when they first learn about the traditional schools or madhabs of Sunni jurisprudence, such as the Shafi'i school which Imam Nawawi rahimahullah followed, want to know, why can't one just be a Muslim without any jurisprudence or madhab? In short, it is no longer plain to people what the schools are doing in Islam.
And this is important. Most people who don't follow a madhab is because of the spread of certain ideologies that contradict Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah in belief and practice, but they've been spread as Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And they've become popular and famous. So the person and those movements told people you don't have to follow a madhab. We just follow Quran and Sunnah. As if the person who follows the madhab doesn't follow Quran and Sunnah, which is insane. But a person who don't know, can easily be deceived. As one teacher mentioned, I love it, the way he said it. He said, for the common person, proofs are irrelevant. Why? Because whatever proof someone tells them, and they don't have the tools to understand what a proof is and how it works and how it's used, it is going to be a valid proof for them. And I never heard that expression. I was like, man, that's nice. He said, for the common person, a proof for a legal ruling is irrelevant. Why? Because they don't have the tools to understand what is a valid proof and what is an invalid proof, because they don't have the scholarship to recognize how proofs are used. So if a person comes to this person and says, I see this verse in the Quran and it means this, they don't know how verses are used or how rulings are extracted. So they don't even know if that's a valid proof. Or someone gives you a hadith and say, the Prophet ﷺ said this. They don't know anything about hadith. They don't know how to determine a hadith is authentic or unauthentic, how it is abrogated or abrogating, how is it restricted or general. They don't have this knowledge. So just saying the Prophet said something, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they don't understand that sometimes you can have a hadith that is not acted upon. They don't understand that. They don't understand different cases of why hadith were narrated, asbab al-wurud. They don't know all these things. So whatever you tell them is a proof to them, right? And hence, that's why you have so many people walking around with hadith, which are not even a proof for what they're talking about, because there's a common person that don't know, right? So that's why we said the mujtahid mutlaq, who actually knows what is a proof and what proofs are valid for legal rulings, which is very important to understand, right? Is this point clear? The dumbing down of religious knowledge has developed this problem. The dumbing down of religious knowledge has developed the problem of anybody can use anything as an evidence. Now,
in previous ages, it was taken for granted among practicing Muslims that everyone followed a madhab. No
and keep
particular.
this in mind. In previous ages, prior to, and I'm going to say it explicitly, prior to the advent of this modern Wahhabi Salafi movement, everyone followed the madhab. That was just known. So prior to the past 200 and some odd years, with the development of that movement, everybody followed the madhab. That was just well known, right? After that movement developed, they came with this, we don't follow madhabs, we're on Quran and Sunnah, and calling people who follow madhabs mushrikun and idol worshippers and worshiping the imams and all that nonsense, right? But prior to that, prior to the 13th century, scholars, laymen, all the way back time to the times of the Imam followed madhabs for over 1,000 years.
No particular school was.
And I know many people don't like when I use the term Wahhabi, but when you're clarifying something, you have to be explicit, right? Other than that, because they are the ones who started that, this idea of we don't follow madhabs. So that came from that deviant ideology from our tradition, right? So I'm mentioning it so that you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not ambiguous that you sit around saying, well, because in our time, they are still spreading those ideas. Even though some of them are now following madhabs, but they're not following the madhab as the madhab is. They're still doing their stuff in the name of the madhab. That still exists. So it hasn't changed. It's not like we're following the traditional way. No, we follow a madhab, but we have Aqidah different from Ahl Sunnah. We don't follow Tasawwuf. We don't follow the way. And in fiqh, we mix in the madhab with our understanding of Quran and Sunnah. But I'll say I'm Shafi'i or I'm Maliki or I'm Hanbali. Really, I'm Wahhabi. But I have mixed and I went under the cover of a Shafi'i or a Hanafi or a Maliki or a Hanbali. But really, I'm a Wahhabi. So you got to be aware of this problem or you'll never really understand it. Right? We are studying Islamic jurisprudence according to the Shafi'i school. For the person who just joined and doesn't know what the series is about, it's a book in Islamic jurisprudence according to the Shafi'i school of law. Now,
No particular school was obligatory, but most people knew it was obligatory to follow one imam or another in one's day to day practice of the religion.
mhm.
In our day, the reasons for this have become so forgotten or obscured that they are no longer widely known. A
And
modern
keep that in
Muslim
mind. There is a change. 13th century Hijra, right? Right? Uh, so there is a change. And when there is a change, the change is still a change, even if it became normalized, right? So it's normal, right? Listen, I know this is widespread, right? I know it for sure. I'll give you in my own city, all of the masajid are influenced by Wahhabism. Every single one of them, except Masjid Muhammad. That's deep. And there are other masjids. That's true. That's not me making it up. It's true. Even the immigrants who are traditionally Hanafi, like the Bengalis and the Pakistanis, have become Wahhabi. They're traditionally, for 1,000 years or more, have been Hanafi, Maturidi, Sufi. But because of the advent of Wahhabism and Ikhwani movements within the Masajid in America, they all became, even though outwardly they say I'm Hanafi, but they have not learned and are carrying Wahhabi ideas. Every single one of them, right? This is a real thing. And so I'm just saying, if you look at one place, which I'm living in it, you can, by analogy, realize what's going on around the country, right? It's not just specific to one place. That's a lot of places. So it's very important that you understand things as they are, right? If you want an analogy, this America was not the land of the Europeans, but they came, they slaughtered the natives, took the land, and now you almost forget that this wasn't originally their land, right? Everyone's aware of that. That slowly has happened within our Islamic framework. Somebody came in, took all of the headline, the leadership with their money, with their political influence, and now everyone became like them, and you forgot the origin, right? That's the case. Mm.
A modern Muslim who practices his religion in the way it has been practiced since the earliest centuries of Islam meets with arguments of latter day reformers who say, often with complete sincerity, The words of Allah Ta'ala and His Messenger, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Allah Ta'ala bless him and give him peace, are divinely protected from error, while the schools of mujtahid imams such as Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, and Ahmed are not. Who needs the imams of sacred law when we have the Quran and Hadith?
Read that whole section again and we'll pause there because I'll come back on it tomorrow.
A modern Muslim who practices his religion in the way it has been practiced since the earliest centuries of Islam.
So a traditional Sunni Muslim, right? Like we are Sunni, traditional Sunnis in belief and practice and spirituality. The traditional has been like this since the time of the Salaf, right? Right? That's a traditional Sunni Muslim. Go ahead.
Meets with arguments of latter day reformers who
Latter
say
day reformers is a nice way to say these Wahhabi people, so called Salafi people. That's a nice way to say that's who you're talking about, right? Latter day reformers, meaning reforming the religion, right? In an invalid manner. Go ahead.
who say, often with complete sincerity, the
So listen to
words
the point. The person who said is not necessarily a bad person. They've been taught that that's what they really believe. And so they're sincere in that. Sincerely wrong, but sincere. Go ahead.
the words of Allah Ta'ala and His Messenger, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Allah Ta'ala bless him and give him peace, are divinely protected from error, while the schools of mujtahid imams such as Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, and Ahmed are not. Who needs the imams of sacred law when we have the Quran and Hadith?
And here's the funny thing, right? That statement saying that the Imams are not ma'asum, but the Quran and the Sunnah is ma'asum, right? It is protected from error. Even if one accepted that, but your understanding of the Quran and Sunnah is not protected from error. And your understanding is not like the understanding of those four Imams. So that says a whole lot, right? I follow Quran and Sunnah. The Imams could make mistakes. I follow Quran and Sunnah, and there's no mistakes in the Quran and the Sunnah, according to that claim. But in your understanding, there may be a lot of mistakes. And that's highly likely that there's a lot of mistakes in your understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, as opposed to those great Imams who were the top ranking legal scholars in the Islamic history. So what you're saying is leave their understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, who are qualified to deduce legal rulings, to your understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, who don't even have the tools to make legal rulings. That's something to think about. And inshallah, we'll stop there. I have a few questions, and we'll continue this as we go along with the book, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Let me take a few questions. I have to really go, but I'll take a few. Question, what does Wahhabi, that's an H instead of a J. There is a group that came out of the Arabian Peninsula in the 13th century, at the end of the 13th century, and spread and now have become popular. You may call them Salafi in your modern time, but the Salafi are known as Wahhabi. And they came with many strange ideas that contradict traditional Sunni Islam, but they came in the name of Sunni Islam in matters of belief, in matters of practice, in matters of spirituality. So they are, that's that group. And they are the ones who spread these ideas in our time. Is there anything wrong with following a madhab but not choosing an opinion from another madhab if you find it stronger? That is the job of a mujtahid scholar, to weigh legal opinions, right? So as for a common person, if they learn from a legal scholar that an opinion is stronger, then they can follow the stronger opinion. As for them of themselves trying to weigh opinions between madhahib, this is not permissible. They're not qualified, right? There's a lot of legal skills that go into weighing legal opinions between scholars of ijtihad, right? Qualified scholars who do legal ruling to weigh their opinions. You have to be a scholar yourself. Other than that, you're just following your desires because you don't have the ability to weigh the opinion. Because to weigh the opinion, you have to know everything that is related to that opinion, all the evidences, how evidences work, which ones are strong, which ones are weak, and why. And I guarantee you, with any ruling, if we ask the common person, let's examine the different rulings between the madhahib, and you tell me why one is stronger than the other, you can't do it. It's impossible without the tool set. So that's why I say no. But in other way, you can follow any madhab you want within a legal ruling, so long as its conditions, its integrals are maintained and its invalidators are avoided. You don't have to follow the same madhab in every legal ruling, so long as you don't mix them in a way that no one considers your act of worship valid. Mm. This is an example of what I'm talking about. If you pray according to the Hanafi madhab, that's the way you pray. As for the legal rulings in the Hanafi madhab, every single living ruling is not scholarly consensus. So if you didn't pray winter, right, which you should never miss, uh, it's not that you, according to every scholarly, would be sinful. So that's an example of why the Hanafis consider witr. They don't consider witr like the five prayers. Wajib doesn't mean the same thing as fard in the Hanafi school. There are levels to obligatoriness, right? They're not the same. So don't think that for the Hanafis, witr is the same rank as the five obligatory prayers. That's not the case. So there is a difference in terminology when they use something as necessary or obligatory. They're different. They have different meanings. And the rulings related to them are different. And you can easily ask a Hanafi about the details of between fard and wajib in the school. And how does one get to be considered fard and another thing begins to consider wajib? You should ask a Hanafi scholar in that, or a learned person who knows the Hanafi school. I'm Shafi. I know that's the case, but I don't know the details. Hmm. Allah. In what way are Salafis deviant from Sunni Islam? Multiple ways in areas of belief, and this is one way, while some of them say you don't follow a madhab. And then in spirituality, there's so many. That's a whole lecture series to do that. But in general, they don't follow the traditional methodology of the Sunni Muslims among the Asharis and Maturidis, Hanafis, Malikis, Shafis, Hanbalis, and the people of Tasawwuf or Sufism. The name Sunni Muslim is what mean is Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. That was from the time of the early Muslims. There are narrations from that from the time of the Salaf. And it's Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah was known as Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah to distinguishing it from the innovations that existed in that time of the Qadariya, Murjiya, Khawarij, and other groups like that. So that's how Ahl Sunnah, it's the opposite of Ahl Bidah wal Furqa. And that is from the time of the Salaf. while menstruating unlawful to recite the Quran. Does it mean read from the? No, it means to recite. So you can't touch the Quran when you're in the state of minor ritual impurity, but when you're in a state of al-hayd, you can't recite as Quranic recitation. So even if you don't touch the book, even if you look, you can't recite the Quran with the intention of reciting. Highly recommended. I don't know what you mean by that. What are you talking about? If that's it, we can. If there's the last question, rebuilding the mirror. If you mean highly recommended, tell me what you mean by that quickly. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Tonight, the Black Imams Roundtable. Let me see if they might have changed the title. So let me check 1 second. So tonight's Black Imams Roundtable is the night that the other two Imams are trying to get us canceled. So Imam Genius and Imam Boombap are vehemently trying to get us canceled. So tonight's discussion will be on the current events of the Ye and Kyrie situation. Kanye, Ye West, and Kyrie Irving, and their anti-Semitic activity. So they want to start some trouble and mix the pot up and get us blocked. But okay, whatever. Stop. Don't get scared now, right? So we'll discuss that tonight during the Black Imams Roundtable. But in my Ice Cube and my Ice T voice, freedom of speech. Just watch what you say. Remember that Ice T song? Freedom of speech. Just watch what you say. Right? But hey, everybody got to lose their channel. For the brother on YouTube, Omar bin Saeed, if you are ready to become a Muslim, just say, there is no one that deserves to be worshipped except Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. And then go, you can send us an email at, we'll try to help you, info@mmacinc.org. Can one take Salafi fiqh like a fatwa? No, haram. Haram. Forbidden. You can only take a fiqh from one of the four schools, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali. And the religious fatwa has to come to that. You cannot take it from other than that. It's haram. By the agreement of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. So we'll see you tonight. Remember the time change. So it's 7 o'clock because I'm still messed up about that. But we'll see y'all then, inshallah. Barakallahu bikum. I have to go. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. I'll see you tonight.